I've been a divorce attorney for about 15 years now, and I've seen thousands of couples go through the absolute worst, ugliest parts of their lives. In all that time, there's been a handful of cases that have just been so horrific and so just tragic that they've stuck with me. My name's Sean Smallwood. This is Inside Divorce, and stick around till the end of this video because I'm also going to let you know how you can avoid these things happening to you if you're considering divorce. The first example of one of these cases that really stuck with me is the case where the parties were both destroyed financially. Before these parties got divorced, they actually had a lot of stuff. They had a really nice house. They both had a lot of money in their 401ks, but they ultimately went through such an ugly divorce process that by the time it was over, they had almost nothing left. This particular case started out like many others do, where there was an allegation that the husband had committed some act of domestic violence against the wife. As is typically the case, the husband denied any sort of wrongful activity, but what followed was a multi-year, high conflict, absolute mess of a case where there was a petition for protection against domestic violence or protective order. There was a corresponding divorce case. There were high conflict custody matters. This case had multiple emergency hearings. This case had multiple evidentiary hearings regarding custody. These parties took 2 years before they even got to mediation, which is absolutely insane. The part that really messed them up financially that a lot of people don't think about when they're gearing up for a divorce is the fact that when you take one household that's going to now become two households, the longer that divorce process stretches on, you've got kind of financial chaos happening. You got the parties maintaining some expenses related to the marital residence. You've got maybe the husband paying his bills and expenses on his new residence. You've got both people paying their attorneys hundreds of dollars by the hour. And you add in the mix a high conflict cases where the attorneys are going to be spending massive amounts of time going to multiple evidentiary hearings, multiple emergency motion hearings, having a trial on a domestic violence injunction, and just going back and forth at each other's throats over the custody issues. That is a recipe for absolute financial disaster. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Both parties' employment income was enough to cover their expenses, but not their insanely massive attorney's fees. So they ultimately had to drain their retirement savings just to pay the lawyers. The next example of a case that really stuck with me was the high conflict divorce where the kids were just destroyed. Now, this is something every person who's considering divorce, who has kids, should be making it their number one priority to plan out how they're going to protect their children from the divorce process. In this particular case, again, there were domestic violence issues happening between the husband and the wife. There was domestic violence that occurred in front of the kids. Right? The kids were witnessing domestic violence. The kids were witnessing screaming matches between the parties, dishes being thrown, all kinds of crazy stuff. The kids were exposed to alienating conduct, right? One of the parents was talking to the kids constantly about the other parent in a very negative way, to the point where at one point the kids said, "Hey, we don't want to go see that other parent." And that was really sad because then we had to go through this process with the court where we're getting guardian ad litems appointed to the case, where we're getting the kids in therapy. It was a big circus that really never had to go down that road, except for the fact that mom and dad just could not, if their life depended on it, shield the kids from their conflict, from their emotional garbage, their baggage that they had with each other. They just could not stop and consider the kids. And as a result, these kids ended up needing tremendous amounts of therapy. There was some evidence that the child was just really emotionally traumatized by the conflict between the parents. It was just absolutely dreadful. And the problem is, in those situations, for the parents, it becomes this war, right? Who's going to win? It's about winning custody with the kids, winning the most time with the kids. But in that battle, you have to imagine there's missiles and bullets coming from this side. There's missiles and bullets coming from this side. But you got the kids right here in the middle, right? And the kids in those cases are absolutely getting hit and shredded to pieces with those missiles and bullets, emotionally shredded to pieces. And as a divorce attorney, My goal for my clients is to get them through this process in one piece emotionally, so that on the other side of this situation, on the other side of this process, they're still emotionally the same person that they were when they went into it. But you have to do the same thing for the kids. You have to make sure that the children are the same, that they're protected, that they're still emotionally healthy on the other side of the divorce. The third example of a case that really stuck with me was the divorce that never should have happened in the first place. I had a potential client come in to consult with me, and it turned out that only thing, the only thing that they disagreed on was spending money. He was more of a saver, an investor, and she was more of a spender. And they just could not get on the same page with each other. They were otherwise absolutely in love. They had a phenomenal marriage. They were building an amazing life together. They had a child. Everything about this couple seemed healthy, right? But they just fought so much about money, and they could not get on the same page, that ultimately they ended up going through the divorce process. As the attorney, I tried everything I could to get them on track with a reconciliation. I tried recommending marriage counseling. I tried recommending financial counseling. I tried everything I could. Ultimately, the marriage still went down in flames. The parties got divorced, and it ended up being a relatively high conflict case because they could not reach an agreement on how to share time with their child. And it was just an absolute shame. It never should have happened. These people could have found some compromise. They could have found a good marriage counselor that could have helped them bridge the difference between where they were in terms of saving and investing versus spending. They could have saved that child. Like this, we had this small child who should have had the opportunity to grow up in a home with both parents, where they then had to witness their parents go through this high conflict divorce. And now that child's going back and forth between the parents' homes. And not that a post-divorce child who goes back and forth from mom and dad is necessarily disadvantaged, right? Because it happens all the time. But the thing that didn't have to happen was a child watching that marriage fall apart, watching the conflict between their parents, because I absolutely believe that children who watch their parents go through high conflict divorces are way more likely to ultimately end up going through high conflict divorces themselves down the road. What most people don't understand about divorce is it's not just filing a piece of paper, and it's not just legal, right? It's not just legal issues. It's financial. It's emotional. It affects the kids. It affects your future relationships. It affects you as a person. So many people who go through this divorce process do not come out the other side of it the same person that they were when they went into it. They're different. Often they're damaged. And I think that if people spent more time just preparing themselves emotionally for what that process is, I think a couple of things would happen. I think that maybe less people would get divorced, which I think that would be a win, right? More people would probably invest a little more time and energy into things like marriage counseling, understanding what to expect, understanding how harmful it can be, and how devastating that process can be on you, on your finances, on your kids, and would probably settle. A lot more cases would go more peacefully. I think that would be a huge win. After 15 years inside divorce cases, I can tell you this: the decisions that people make at the beginning of the divorce usually shape the next 20 years of their life. I've got some materials in development right now on assisting people with making that decision, whether or not to move forward with divorce, how to divorce amicably on an uncontested basis, how to protect the children, how to protect your finances, how to prepare for mediation and negotiate. So be sure and keep an eye on our bio and our description below, because once we have those materials up and running, I'll be linking to them there. If this video added some value to your situation, absolutely subscribe or follow. Thumbs up or hearts help us out so much in the algorithms.